Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceAndLiberty.com. With us today for the first time is Dr. Ron Paul, former congressman and former presidential candidate for the Republican Party. Ron Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
All right, well, I'd first like to discuss about the presidential race. The GOP establishment seems to be blatantly trying to stop Donald Trump from getting the nomination. I know you personally have experience of being mistreated by the GOP during the 2012 convention. So can you tell us about what happened at the 2012 convention and what the GOP did to you, and also what has this taught you about the GOP?
Well, they always protect their interests, and the leadership of the Democrats and the Republicans always want to protect an establishment-type candidate. So if you become too independent in either party, they do everything they can to make sure that person doesn't get the nomination. So that's possibly what happened. Although I didn't consider myself the same type of threat in 12, we did qualify to give them a little bit of a challenge, and we did qualify to be nominated. We did qualify for a speech at the convention, and they couldn't stand the idea that somebody would get up there and on principle challenge what they've been doing. So they changed the rules, and all of a sudden the new rules said that I didn't qualify, so I didn't get to do that. But now it's interesting that that same rule that made it more difficult for the underdog to challenge the establishment. It turns out that Trump overwhelmed, and he became the establishment, and the Republican Party is the challenger, and therefore they're excluded from bringing up another candidate. But it's a part of the dirty business of politics is they write rules, but they're written there to be changed arbitrarily. There's nothing particularly wrong with the rules because the rule was actually helping me. The evil in it all is the fact that they can change it arbitrarily and do whatever they want, and that's why I think the American people are misled when they think these elections really have a lot of meaning, because I think they're just sort of to pacify the people, to make them think that they are really participating in some important event, because over the years I became totally convinced that regardless of whether you have a Republican or a Democrat in, you end up with more government, more spending, more wars, and a whole mess. So there's not a big difference. So this is difficult for a lot of people to understand, because they want their vote to count, and they want to make a big difference between all the candidates, and it's just not true.
Definitely, and I know in another interview you talked about how, as you're talking about the Republicans and Democrats, it seems like they're just, two sides of the same coin. And you've learned that the people who want to keep the status quo seem to basically, as you said, have their finger in the pot and can control things. Now, I often hear about, the powers that be and people pulling the strings, but I rarely hear, the names of the people who are doing this. So when you're talking about the people who want to keep the status quo and have their finger in the pot, who exactly are you referring to?
Well, coming up with the exact names becomes a little bit more difficult, but you can come up with establishment people and organizations like the neoconservatives, are a real group, and they were well represented, to say, in the last administration with Dick Cheney. He was really, for the most part, the president of the United States, but the neoconservatives loved him. So there's a lot of names listed with the neoconservatives, and they promote, the foreign policy, which is Republican, and that Hillary Clinton follows. But then you would have a group of people who are in the financial industry, and those will be the very, very wealthy bankers that benefit from the Federal Reserve, and they get the bailouts when necessary. So they'll do anything possible to make sure that the Fed doesn't get a true audit, and that they never weaken the Federal Reserve, because they need the system of inflation and printing money. So they do that. So you have that, and you have other foreign policy special interests around the world. So there's plenty of them, but there's probably no one person as much as the principle of intervention, and it's open, but it's nonpartisan in that they don't care who the party is, just so that they have the control.
So I guess looking at, you've talked about how the election is also, it just seems right now to be entertainment and possibly on purpose to really distract from the real issues. So I'd like to discuss a little bit about the real issues. You've talked about the Federal Reserve, and recently President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the chairman of the Fed, Janet Yellen, held a secret meeting. And I just wanted to quick read a quote from an article you wrote about this. You said, "The real reason for all these secret meetings could be a panic that the Fed's 8-year explosion of money creation has not just failed to revive the economy, but it is also about to cause another major market meltdown." Did you want to discuss a little bit about this?
Well, I expect a major meltdown to come, and the fact that they had these 3 meetings rather recently and rather rapidly, they can communicate in other ways, but the fact that they announced these meetings and we don't know what they say and did, but I think it's very, very possible, and the most likely thing is that they're planning, and they know what many of us know, that this thing is unsustainable, and what are they going to do about it? Will they have to do the same thing that they did in 08 and 09, but they're running out of tools, and they may be really panicking over this. I think that's what is happening, because they don't have much left. Can they spend more money? Can they run up more debt? Can they print more money? Can they lower interest rates anymore? They've essentially lost all that. Sometimes they resort to, when countries get into big trouble, they'll divert the attention of the people by having a war, and that, of course, is something that I worry about too, because they're quite capable of doing that, because in many ways we're doing that already. Our drone war going on in the Middle East, we're actually bombing 7 different countries, and it's antagonizing a lot of people, and a real problem that we face.
Now, turning our focus back to the Federal Reserve, what do you think the real reasons are why Federal Reserve officials don't want the Fed to be audited? And also, if the Fed was audited, what do you think we'd find out?
Well, their biggest resistance over the years, they just want to do everything in secrecy. They say non-interference by, the Congress. But no, they want total secrecy because it's always done for special interests. But the biggest resistance that have come, I've noticed over the many years I've worked on this, has been their foreign transactions, because there's a collusion of all the central bankers. And right now their collusion is mainly to keep the reserve currency, the dollar, alive and well, even though that's a tremendous benefit from us. Everybody's involved in it, because they take our dollars, they use our dollars, they hold our dollars. But if the world loses confidence in the dollars and starts dumping it, then we see that collapse that would come, and it will come. But they're working very hard not to do that. But they don't want us to know what kind of deals that they made, say on the bailout in 09, when they were trillions and trillions of dollars transacted with the central banks and foreign governments. They're very much involved in all these foreign transactions. It's amazing that people still can trust the dollar and everything will be okay. But they can do that for a while, but eventually the trust will be lost, and that's when you see the real crisis.
Right, and you talked about this in a recent article. You said that the no-win situation the Fed finds itself in is a sign that we are reaching the inevitable collapse of the fiat currency system. Unless immediate steps are taken to manage the transition, this collapse could usher in an economic catastrophe dwarfing the Great Depression. Therefore, those of us who know the truth must redouble our efforts to spread the ideas of liberty. If we are successful, we may be able to force Congress to properly manage the transition by cutting spending in all areas and auditing, then ending the Federal Reserve. So what is your perspective on what the average person can really do to spread the message of liberty, and is there any way out of this economic catastrophe that you speak of?
Well, it's understanding economics, and it's understanding the principles of liberty and why they're so important. The collapse or the correction is not preventable, because it's locked in place because of all the debt that's hanging in there. It's how do you take care of these financial obligations, $210 trillion worth of obligations that we have. So the collapse will come. But the one thing is that, especially for young people, they look at that and say, this is horrible. How can we do anything? And the majority still like big government. Look, there's a bunch of young people now even think they're socialists, and it looks really bad. But the encouragement is that things are changed by ideas and not by just pure numbers. You need to get the support of the majority of people, but the important thing is that 7 or 8 or 9% in intellectual leadership believe in something, and that's where the shift is coming. The majority is still out there thinking, well, we just want more government, more spending, and that'll take care of it. And some people say, well, we can't change it all, so we're not. We shouldn't. We should just give up on it. But the whole thing is right now we are making progress. More people in the young age group are looking at the principles of liberty and non-interventionist foreign policy and getting rid of the Fed, and they know this debt is unsustainable. So instead of saying, well, we're a long way from 51%, so what are we going to do? Well, just so if you have 5 or 10% who are in leadership positions spreading ideas, you should feel reassured, because that's where we're making good progress.
Well, Ron Paul, I really wanted to thank you for your time today. Before we let you go, are there any last thoughts you had, and did you want to share with the viewers where they can find you if they want to learn more?
Okay, yeah, so the best place now is to come to my daily web show, and that's ronpaullibertyreport.com, and that can be found easily. But I want to thank you for your efforts, and encourage all the young people you can reach to get involved, get educated, find out why freedom is so much better than the authoritarianism that you've inherited, and that there's reason to be optimistic.
This video was brought to you in part by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Prepper's latest interview with Bix Weir. In this interview, Bix Weir covers compelling evidence that shows the wheels are falling off of the banking system. He also covers the key risks of major instability as we head into the presidential election. Bix Weir notes that the facade is being stripped away to reveal the ugly, undemocratic truth about big party politics, and ordinary people are becoming enraged. Stay tuned to learn if this is a curse or a blessing in disguise.